Spoštovane gledalke, spoštovani gledalci, dober večer in lepo pozdravljeni v oddaji Drugorazredni. Tokratna epizoda je nekoliko drugačna. Naša televizija Nova24TV je skupaj s tednikom Demokracija priča hudih napadov strani portala necenzurirano.si, ki ga povzemajo za čuda prav vsi veliki slovenski mediji. Torej, tarča smo obtožb o nezakonitem financiranju strani zasebnih madžarskih podjetij. Tarča pa je tudi Slovenska demokratska stranka, ki naj bi se prek Nove24TV nezakonito financirala. Kakšna je resnica? Si poglejmo v prispevku. Javnomnenjske raziskave, ki so prikazovale rezultate, da si volivci SMC in Desusa ne želijo v vlado z Janezom Janšo, pa da si večina Slovencev želi na volitve. Kazenska ovadba zoper Zdravka Počivalška. Vse to zgolj slučajno, v času, ko se kaže resna možnost, da se oblikuje vlada pod vodstvom Janeza Janše. Ker pritiski niso zalegli, poskuša globoka država preko čez noč ustvarjenega spletnega portala necenzurirano.si ustvariti afero, da se stranka SDS nezakonito financira z Madžarske in da je problem, ker so madžarski zasebneži lastniki medijev Nova24TV in Demokracija. Zadnja afera, ki to ni, pa zlonamerno namiguje, da naj bi del denarja madžarskih poslovnežev končal na računu stranke SDS.
Treba najprej nekatere stvari zelo jasno postaviti. Prvič, nič ni nezakonitega, popolnoma nič. Nova24TV posluje popolnoma legalno, skladno s slovenskimi zakoni in kdorkoli piše o tem, da gre za nezakonito financiranje ali nas, ali stranke, je navaden lažnivec. Lahko ni navaden lažnivec, lahko je zlonamernež, ima pač politične interese in tako naprej. Gre za popolnoma izmišljeno zgodbo in Nova24TV se ne financira iz tujine. Nova24TV posluje tako, da prodaja svoj oglasni prostor, tako na televiziji kot na spletu in zato zaračunava. Tudi podjetjem, ki so potem v lasti nekih madžarskih podjetnikov, ampak po tej logiki, da je to nezakonito, pomeni, da se nezakonito financira POP TV, ker recimo oglašujejo Volkswagen, to pomeni, da so blizu, da jih financira Merklova, oglašujejo kavo Bar Cafe, ki je Hrvaška in tako naprej.
Odgovorni urednik televizije Nova24TV Boris Tomašič zanika tudi zgodbo o denarnih tokovih, ki naj bi šli v Severno Makedonijo, saj da nima povezave z Novo24TV. Poslovneži pač lahko svoj denar vlagajo tudi v medije v drugih državah.
Očitno, in tukaj je ves problem, je Nova24TV, tako spletni portal kot televizija, postala preresen, preveč vpliven medij, preveč bran, preveč gledan medij smo postali, in nas poskušajo diskreditirati. In posredno preko nas tudi SDS. Zakaj? Zato, ker ima nekaj poslancev, pa tudi predsednik stranke, delnice tega podjetja. Ljudje so verjetno nekateri pozabili, nekateri ne. To podjetje je nastalo tako, da je 800 ljudi, ki so želeli, da se ta medijski monopol razbije, kupilo delnice v javni prodaji.
Problem je torej v tem, ker smo razbili medijsko enoumje. Njihova resnica ni več edina, zato smo jim trn v peti, dodaja Tomašič.
Čeprav jaz za neke obskurne portale naredim takole in jih ni več, ker so popolnoma nepomembni, gre za neke obupance, bi bilo pa zanimivo ugotoviti, kdo njih financira, odkje prihaja ta denar. Po mojih informacijah jih financira obsojeni goljuf Martin Odlazek, in preko njegovih podjetij posredno in neposredno povezano z njimi, v glavnem pa ta denar prihaja od nas davkoplačevalcev, podobno kot RTV, ki povzema nekritično ta medij, podobno kot nekateri drugi mediji, ki so neposredno povezani z vladajočo politiko.
Tudi urednik tednika Demokracija Jože Biščak je prepričan, da je edini cilj portala necenzurirano.si oblatiti SDS.
Lastništvo Novih obzorij, ki izdaja revijo Demokracija, je jasno in zelo transparentno. Ve se, da so večinski lastniki Madžari in jaz v tem ne vidim nič narobe. Slovenska demokratska stranka se je pač odločila, da proda svoj delež. Politična stranka je pravna oseba zasebnega prava, lahko rečemo, da so zasebniki. In so se odločili, da pač prodajo madžarskemu podjetju. Komu prodajo, komu lastnik svojo lastnino prodaja, je pač njegova stvar.
Tudi za Bojana Dobovška, ki preiskuje delovanje globoke države, lastništvo našega medija ni sporno.
Konkretno, če rečemo za vašo televizijo, ve se točno, kdo je vložil in kam je vložil. Imamo pa tudi nekatere medijske hiše, za katere se pa ne ve, lastniki so skladi, ne veš, kdo je za tem skladom. Se pravi, da, potrebno je razčistiti situacije, ampak v celotnem spektru imamo cel kup časopisov, cel kup medijev in ne ve se, kdo in kako kaj financira in kdo je resnični lastnik v ozadju. Prav tisto, ne, ali so to slamnati lastniki ali pa gre za resno osebo, ki jo lahko izkažemo.
O delovanju medijskega kartela v Sloveniji je govoril že dr. Matevž Tomšič. Nedokazane navedbe portala necenzurirano.si so povzeli praktično vsi veliki mediji.
Jaz gledam na to, da če povzemajo en tak medij, zakaj ne povzemajo vseh? Če imamo recimo nacionalno televizijo, potem naj objavi novice vseh takšnih portalov. Zakaj samo enega? Kot drugo, me pa zanima financiranje, kdo je ustanovil, kakšna je kariera teh ljudi, od kje je prišel denar za njihove prostore, za njihovo zagonsko delovanje, koliko imajo plače, kako se financirajo, kakšne oglaševalce imajo, ali so to podjetja v večinski državni lasti, kakšen vpliv je potem na to. Se pravi, če hočejo nekaj preiskovati, morajo najprej sami pri sebi razčistiti, kako se pa oni financirajo in kako odvračajo te vplive in pa predvsem, kje dobijo informacijo.
Boris Tomašič, je Nova24TV strankarski medij SDS-a, ali to sploh skriva in kako veliko vpliv ima Janez Janša v tej televiziji?
Ja, berem te neumnosti, zdaj, da povem nekaj številk. Mi imamo skoraj 700 000 bralcev na spletu. Ne? Če smo strankarski medij, to pomeni, da ima SDS 700 000 članov, ne? Kar je neumnost. Mislim, da ima SDS nekih 20 do 30 000 članov, tako da smo daleč od tega, da smo strankarski medij. Smo pa, in tega pa ne skrivamo za razliko od drugih objektivnih medijev, desno orientirani, vrednostno pripadamo evropski desnici, desnim konzervativnim vrednotam in tega ne skrivamo in smo zelo kritični do levih oblasti, do tistega, kar delajo, do ilegalnih prehodov meje, do višanja davkov, do problemov, ki jih občuti slovenski človek. Ja, če pomeni zavzemati se za reševanje problemov slovenskih državljanov, če se pomeni opozarjanje na probleme v zdravstvu, v pokojninskem sistemu in tako naprej, če to pomeni, da smo SDS-ov medij, potem smo, v resnici smo pa en resen konzervativni medij, ki ima ogromno gledalcev in ogromno bralcev in smo daleč presegli, da bi lahko nekdo nas označil kot strankarsko glasilo.
In ravno to je zmotilo Marjana Šarca. Na vsak način je poskušal prisiliti državna podjetja, da ne bi oglaševala v opozicijskih medijih. Delno so mu zle namere tudi uspele.
Sploh ne skrivajo več, da si ne želijo desne vlade. Tudi gospod Šarec je rekel, da desne vlade ne bo, oziroma si je ne želi, oziroma da ne bo sodeloval v nikakršni desni vladi. Torej, problem je desnica kot taka. Seveda smo imeli izpad marketinških prihodkov, ampak vodstva državnih podjetij so odreagirala različno. Nekateri so še vedno želeli pri nas oglaševati, ker imajo interes, in so mi pač povedali, jaz moram svoj proizvod ali storitev prodajati in levim in desnim. To je pač ekonomija.
In kaj se bo spremenilo za Novo24TV, če se res zgodi tretja vlada Janeza Janše?
Pustimo, da vidimo, kaj bo, ampak Nova24 bo postala mainstream medij, kar že v bistvu je, in to jih skrbi. Ne zdaj, a bomo mi proti Janši ali za Janšo, ne? Skrbi jih, če smo vplivni. Ne? In drugi, ki pišejo, in Šurc je rekel, o tem bomo postali mi režimski medij. Lejte, danes imamo na medijskem trgu 90% režimskih medijev in Novo24TV. Nova24TV bo ostala kritična, tako spletni portal kot televizija. Seveda pa, kot sem že rekel, če bo ta vlada sprejemala dobre ukrepe, če bo zajezila pritok ilegalnih migrantov, če bo skrajšala čakalne vrste, če bo zagotovila pokojnine, če bo zagotovila delovna mesta, jo pač ne bomo kritizirali. Če pa tega ne bo storila, pa zagotovo ne bomo prijazni do njih, tako kot so režimski mediji prijazni do res ene prazne klovnovske vlade Marjana Šarca.
Najbolj pomembno pa je, da bomo ostali v službi resnice, še zagotavlja vodstvo Nove24TV. Obstaja velika verjetnost, da se bo v prihodnjih dneh pod vodstvom Janeza Janše oblikovala neka nova desnosredinska vlada. V nekaterih medijih smo lahko v zadnjih tednih prebrali, da bi to pomenilo urbanizacijo Slovenije, češ da naj bi se Janez Janša podredil svojemu madžarskemu kolegu. Priča smo bili tudi obtožbam na račun Slovenske demokratske stranke, da gre za izključujočo, nestrpno, celo fašistično politično opcijo. Kako pa v resnici deluje madžarski premier Viktor Orban? Kaj bi pomenilo nekoliko tesnejše sodelovanje med Madžarsko in Slovenijo? Bi bilo to res sporno? In kako bi dejansko delovala ta desnosredinska koalicija? Kako to vidijo nekateri opazovalci od zunaj, smo preverjali na Madžarskem institutu 21. stoletja, kjer se je z nami pogovarjal direktor za zunanje politike Gergerli Berzi. Poglejmo si intervju.
So, Mr. Berzi, can you at first explain us what's the purpose of your institute and how old is this institute?
This is a relatively new institute in spirit. It has existed for a couple of years, but the current staff and the current leadership is very new. We started our work this April, but everybody who works here, some senior analysts and junior analysts, they all have a couple of years of experience in analyzing foreign policy, domestic politics, and basically any issue regarding sovereignty. So the main job of our institute, I think, is to defend national sovereignty. It's one of our core values, together with Christian culture and market economy and basically national identity as well. So these are the main topics that our institute analyzes. And this is what revolves. So our work revolves around these issues.
So maybe some people would think that you were formed in defense of Viktor Orban.
I think every analyst is independent in their own way. So every one of us had a different political, analytical career. So some people deal with domestic issues, but for example, I usually talk about foreign affairs issues in Hungarian, and of course part of my job is to talk to foreign journalists or other analysts about Hungarian issues. But all in all, we don't deal that much with specific politicians, but we try to explain Hungary's position to our foreign partners and other parties. So basically that's our scope. We are interested in what Hungary's role is in Europe, what Central Europe's role is in Europe, and how Europe can stay competitive on the global arena as well.
So why do you think that Hungary is seen as one of those, let's say, countries that don't listen to Brussels politics, that don't respect, like, let's say, migrant quotas and things like that? And Hungary has in the past never been in the center of debates in Brussels and also in other institutes. But when we think about Hungary, when media, especially liberal media, report about Hungary, it's always the bad news and the bad things that this government under Viktor Orban is doing. Yeah. Why is Brussels so much interested in what is politics of Viktor Orban, and of course why are they bringing forward certain things like trying to block Hungary, even expel it from certain institutes? What's your position on it?
Well, basically you have to go back a little while. So the so-called new member states most of them at least, 10 member states, have been members for 15 years now. So the accession of Hungary and many other Central European countries happened in 2004. So 15 years is a lot of time, I think. But so after years have passed, our countries, and I think Slovenia can share this experience, felt that the so-called old members, so basically Western Europe and Northern Europe, they could not change the way they spoke with us and about us. So there's always a sort of like looking down upon these member states, and that is why they are still called new member states. They are not new. It's been 15 years. So I think what is happening now is that Central and Eastern Europe is now reaching a point where their political strength is big enough to stand up to other member states. So the balance of power within the EU is changing. But of course, individually, every country is too small to play in the big league. So independently, Hungary cannot force anything on a country like Germany or France. We are not in the same league regarding our economies, the size of our economies, the size of our population, and our overall influence. So this was a very interesting question for Hungarians as well. Why is there so much attention on Hungary? So I think there are two main reasons, and both of them revolve around the Prime Minister. So, and you have to remember that Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is one of the most experienced politicians in the EU. So only Angela Merkel has more government experience than Orbán. But as we see German politics, this might change very soon. So Viktor Orbán has seen a lot. He's been in opposition, he's been on government. He knows everything about politics there is to know. And this is very important in Europe, where many leaders have very low government experience. We were talking about people a few weeks ago who could have become European Commission President who have never been in government in their own countries, which is, I think, crazy. So the two main issues that caused Hungary to be so much in the center, I think, was first, of course, migration. When the migration crisis hit Europe, Hungary was probably the first country to say, we do not want migration, we will defend ourselves and Europe against migration, and we know how to do this, we will erect a fence. And when the Hungarian fence, the idea of a Hungarian fence was first brought to the public, everybody was attacking Hungary. How can you do this? This is inhuman. This is impossible. People will just go around the fence. So it's not effective, and it's not a humane approach. But I think what the government argued back then turned out to be true, and now most of Europe is saying the same thing, that illegal migration cannot be allowed because there is no stopping. So if you let everybody in, then millions and millions of people will come every year, and that physical barriers and so you have ways to stop migration. It was a myth that migration cannot be stopped. Some people still say it, but there was a strong argument that migration cannot be stopped, so we have to adjust, we have to manage it. But Hungary showed that migration can be stopped on land, and a few years later, Italy, especially with Matteo Salvini's ministry, they showed that migration can be stopped on sea as well. So these were two very important steps. And Viktor Orbán became the symbol of anti-immigration politics in Europe. And of course, first he was very isolated. So I remember back then when we traveled around in Europe, everybody said on the lobbies that, yeah, basically we agree with you, but we can't say this out loud. But then more and more people started to support Viktor Orbán internationally. And most importantly, the electorates, so the nations of Europe, have risen up against pro-immigration governments. And year after year, more and more governments who were voted into power were anti-immigration because they realized that this is what their people want to see. And this has elevated the position of the Prime Minister, because in difficult times he recognized that most of the Europeans do not want migration. And when others realized this, they said that, okay, Viktor Orbán was right, we have to do what he did, because this is how you maintain political stability. And I think the other, and I will try to cut this shorter, the other thing that he did was very important, was the revigorization or revitalization of the Visegrad cooperation. So the fact that these countries individually are small was recognized by the Visegrad prime ministers. Even Poland, which is a relatively large country, cannot stand alone in serious debates. But together these four countries have over 60 million people. They have a very strong economy, which for Germany in trade relations is more important than France. So we trade more with Germany than France trades with Germany. And together we can stand for our positions much, much stronger. And of course, Visegrad countries are often supported by other countries. Austria, for example, sometimes Bulgaria, now Italy, and even opposition parties in Slovenia, for example. So these are very important, and I think this new cooperation based on these Central European parties and politicians is maybe the most important international cooperation now in Europe.
So we can say that Hungary is not such a threat individually, but it does pose a threat as a part of Visegrad group member states. Like you said, there are 60 million people living in these four countries, and we can see that these four countries are trying to distance themselves from the Brussels politics. They're looking for an alternative. So how do you see the future of the four countries in a relation to Brussels, to European Union? Could be possible that there will be even further larger split between politics of the East and the West?
I think that is what Visegrad countries are trying to avoid. So, and yes, I agree that so individually Hungary would fall much faster in debates. So if it were only Hungary against 27 countries, that debate would end very fast. And I think in Visegrad country leaders there is a high level of pragmatism regarding this. And the fact that the Visegrad cooperation is so close and so effective is, I think, proven by the fact that there is always, and there has been for 3 or 4 years, there has always been a high level of attack against the whole thing. Governments individually, so against Babiš, against Morawiecki or Szydło before him, against Fico or Pellegrini, and against Viktor Orbán. And the reason for this attack is that big countries recognize that the four Visegrad countries together pose a real threat to their own agendas, so the agendas of Angela Merkel or Emmanuel Macron. And I also agree that there is a large difference between the political strategies and the vision for Europe in Central Europe and in Western Europe. And there is a big gap between these two countries. But the problem is that currently there are rules in the EU which are written in the Lisbon Treaty. But we see that more and more individual countries, governments, and also the Brussels bureaucracy is trying to override these rules, overwrite them. For example, the Spitzenkandidat system, which it can be argued that it tries to be a more democratic way to elect the Commission President, but in reality it just takes away the decision from prime ministers and presidents in the European Council, and tries to strengthen the European Parliament. So there is a different project in Brussels and somewhat in Berlin and Paris. And this project is called the United States of Europe. So basically a European superstate. This is a very clear vision, and maybe Emmanuel Macron is the strongest proponent of this project. And on the other hand, you have an also strong and also very old project, which is the Nations of Europe concept. And I think the Nations of Europe concept is the only realistic way for Europe to proceed, because there are some questions, for example, migration, where there is such a huge divide between East and West. And if you try to force either side to accept the positions of the other side, then the EU will break. And nobody wants that, I think, especially not the Visegrad countries. So for Central Europe, the EU is a very good thing, but some of the plans that are being forced onto them could make it impossible for them to be full members in this community. But there is not only just an East and West divide in the EU. In economic issues, there is also a North and South divide. For example, the conflict between Italy and Germany in economic issues, and how Italy should be, the Italian economy should be revived. There is a huge split between them. So we see very strong divides in the EU, and I think that the Visegrad solution and the Central European solution to strengthen national sovereignty, national governments, and try to stay on this path of consensus, try to deal with each other and find the common ground. I think this is much more pragmatic and much more better for the EU in the future. If you force some issues on different countries, sooner or later you will have a deeper and deeper divide between them.
So we have an interesting fact. We can see it in Slovenia, in public opinion. People still think that the Visegrad group states are underdeveloped. That they're like they were such a long time behind the Iron Curtain, so they were not allowed to even develop. So that the West is much more developed. That we should stick with the Brussels politics. But then, on the other hand, of course, there are many people who are against this Brussels politics. Is Visegrad's group, in your opinion, still underrated? I mean, in this space of European Union, or are people becoming to realize that maybe they should even join this politics? What do you think?
I think that Central Europe and Visegrad countries are regaining their confidence, their self-confidence. And I don't want to speak for other countries, but Hungarians are very proud. I mean, this is an over 1,000-year-old country, and when Western Europeans say that these countries do not have the same level of experience in democracy and market economics, so they have to be educated, people react very badly to that here, because Hungarians believe that they have a very good sense of what democracy is. They have a better sense of what dictatorship is than Western Europe, because we here have experienced dictatorship for decades. And this is why we don't flirt with communism here. But on the other hand, in Western Europe, you see a commission president who has a favorable opinion of Karl Marx, and who is there when the statue of Karl Marx is ceremonically opened. So I think these are very interesting times when there is maybe a higher level of historic wisdom in Central Europe. We are more aware of how history is not just some linear progress, but there are some experiences from our history that teaches us to be much more pragmatic and much more realistic. And on the other hand, in Western Europe, you see utopias and ideologies being favored over reality. And I think the European superstate concept, although there are some German state interests behind it, is a utopia. And Central Europe has had enough of utopias for our lifetime, at least. So, yeah.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that there are, especially in the central and now eastern part of Europe and European Union, there are many countries that elected right government, so they're turning their back to the leftists. It's really interesting to hear why is this happening in these countries, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, no, of course even Italy, but especially in this place here. Is the mentality of the people different? What's, in your opinion, the main reason that so many countries are electing and then, of course, even re-electing right governments? What also happens already twice in Hungary? What's, in your opinion, the main reason for that? Of course, the Brussels have their own say. What's wrong? They say that these governments are populist, that they are, of course, oppressing media. So, what is, in your opinion, the main reason for that? And of course, another question is this oppressing on the media in Hungary real or not?
Yeah, this is very interesting because I'm lucky enough to travel a lot, and whenever I'm in Germany or the United Kingdom or France, I watch the local media very closely. Of course, we watch it from here because we have to, but it is our job. But whenever I am in Germany, for example, I see, and this is no offense to Germany, but this is, I think, a good example. I see a very, very limited scope of opinions, not only in the media, but from politicians, basically in public life. So German public life and the political opinions and the whole scope is very limited. In Hungary, even though people say that press freedom is somehow limited, this is not the case. In Hungary, you can read any type of opinion on the whole political spectrum. And of course, in the age of the internet, this has become much more easy to access. So from far left to far right opinions, you can read anything. And I think this is important because the freedom of speech and the freedom of opinion are very important values here in Central Europe, because we know how it is when there is no freedom. But in the West, the whole issue of political correctness, the whole issue of not violating other people's chosen identities, small group identities, and everything like that. So political correctness in general is limiting the freedom of speech in a very, very dangerous way. And there's a different political model as well. So let's stay with the example of Germany. In Germany, the fact that a grand coalition has ruled in politics for quite a few decades now has eliminated the difference between the center-left and the center-right. And you have a centrist, but more left-wing and more liberal political agenda, which has dominated German politics for decades. But people, especially with the political elites being disconnected from ordinary people's concerns, they are now fed up with this, and they are trying to get rid of this whole centrist blob itself. You see that in Germany, these parties are at a historically low approval rating and popularity. And the Central European the party systems here are very different. And politicians here are forced to be more connected with their electorate because, there is a freedom of media, and basically here you cannot sugarcoat things, the expression sugarcoat. So you cannot say that this is not that, this is not black, this is just gray. Here people, because of their decades in communism, people know how to read between the lines. They understand everything. If you try to talk to them in political correct terms, they will just stop listening to you, or they will realize that you are hiding something. It's a very different political experience. So in reality, I think that the press and media and opinions are in much more grave danger in Western Europe than in Central Europe. You see universities in the United Kingdom or the United States where you cannot say anything, you cannot voice a conservative opinion. You cannot be anti-immigration. Here you can be anything. You can be pro-immigration, you can be anti-immigration. There is an open debate, which I think is the core of democracy. and democracy and healthy debates are in a much more better shape in our countries, I think, than in the West. And this is what you see in the European Union as well, by the way. So in the EU, right now, right-wing parties, even ones that are in government, like PiS in Poland, they are basically under quarantine. It's a governing party, it has dozens of MEPs, but they are not let, so the ruling elites in Europe do not let them get any committee positions, but far left, communist and radical green MEPs are allowed to have positions. I think it is entirely crazy and shows how it's a very one-sided debate, how political correctness is very one-sided, and they use double standards day by day.
Yeah, by the way, when you were talking about political correctness, of course, one of the main reasons that the Brussels politics and the liberal media are attacking Viktor Orban and Hungarian government, also Polish government, is so-called hate speech against illegal migrants. Some even go so far to say that actually Orban's politics are based on the anti-migrant speech. Is that true?
It can be true. I mean, Viktor Orban was, for his second term, elected into government in 2010. He was re-elected in 2014. The migration crisis came in 2015. So that just cannot explain his politics in general. And being opposed to immigration is just one element of Viktor Orban's politics, which have made him very popular in the majority of Hungarians. Just to list a few things, the economy in Hungary was in a very bad shape in 2010. Hungary was very close to Greece at that time, so the chances that the government would, would end up bankrupt and the country could not maintain its finances without large IMF loans or loans from the EU, it was a very strong prospect. And the second government, so the government from 2010 of Viktor Orban, managed to turn this around with with reducing taxes, taxing some international companies which were only here in Hungary because of the low taxes. And at the same time, the government has managed to reduce the level of how do you say, when somebody doesn't have a job?
Oh, you mean
unemployment. So the level of unemployment has been reduced basically to close to zero. There is close to full employment in Hungary, and it used to be over 10%.
But how was that achieved? There would be some liberal media saying that it's because of this working law that's not human and so on.
No, that was passed half a year ago, so again that cannot be true. No, in reality, so there was a government program for people who have no jobs and who have not been employed for years. The government would give them some low-income form of employment, and at the same time the government would support their studies to have some other skills so that they can later get a better job. This was one very important aspect, but at the same time, so the main thing is to put your finances in order and to try and foster economic growth. And in a few years, creditors and companies started to realize that the Hungarian government is not overspending, there is a relative economic stability, and at the same time expenditure went to revitalize the economy. And when there was economic growth, then more and more foreign investment came to Hungary. Basically it's prudent fiscal policy. It's a very key aspect of the government's success, and a very good economic trust in Hungary. So this is how employment went down, this is how growth has been increasing year after year. By the way, the newest, so the latest numbers show that in Hungary there has been an economic growth over 5%. This is one or maybe the best statistic in Europe, in the EU. And it's true for the whole Visegrad group that the level of economic growth exceeds the level of economic growth in the EU overall and in the Eurozone. And this is very important for investors because they don't really care how well German people have been living for decades. They care about the prospects and the chances for growth. And when you mentioned that in the West people say that Central Europeans are underdeveloped, of course there is an economic gap still between like the living standards of Hungarians and German people, but
it's narrowing really.
It's narrowing, and I think it's even more important for people to feel that they are moving forward year by year. Not by much, but they are moving forward, so they have a good chance that their children will inherit better circumstances than they experienced. And the main problem in Western Europe, and even in the United States, and this is what explains the Trump phenomena as well, is that people for years or even for decades have felt that their children will maybe even live under worse circumstances than they did, because there is no real wage growth, working conditions are worsening, there is a high level of unemployment, so you just cannot move forward on your own level. And in Central Europe you can, and maybe you still are less rich than some Western European countries, but at the same time, a year from now, you will have more room for yourself to maneuver, to buy a new house, to buy a new car. And just one more thing to mention, I think, regarding the government policies, which should be interesting to Slovenia as well, is that there's of course a demographic decline in Hungary as well. And the main debate regarding this is that whether we should let immigrants inside and try to have immigrant populations turn around this demographic decline. This is what Germany is doing. Or should we try another path? Should we try supporting young families so that they can have more children, and overall in spending more in family policy? And right now, the Hungarian government, relative to the size of the budget, is spending the most money on family policy in the whole of the EU. So there has been a number of very large projects and programs, government programs in the last years. Young couples receive a very lucrative loan, and if they have children, then the loan is step by step eliminated, so it becomes an aid which they don't have to repay. If you have children, you get a huge amount of money so that you can buy a new house. So the living standards of families is improving by a lot. And if you have 3 children, which is enough to turn around the demographic decline, it's over 2.1. If you have 3 children, then you don't have to pay taxes, personal income taxes. So small, young families, young couples receive all sorts of aid from the government, and this is not to force them to have children, because you cannot force people. But Hungarian statistics and Hungarian research have shown that young people want to have more children than they end up with, and the gap between their wants and how they end up with can be explained by financial reasons. And the government is trying to eliminate any obstacle that young families might have in order for them to have more children.
Maybe only one more question. In this state that we now find European Union countries, and of course...
So I think that Brussels has become a bubble, and Brussels has become power hungry in the last few years. So there are reasons why the bureaucracy in Brussels has become so large. It's because there are now 28 countries, and there are thousands of laws that needs to be harmonized. So of course it requires a huge bureaucracy, but the problems rose when this bureaucracy tried to do politics. Because traditionally the European Commission should not get involved in politics. For some time now it has its own political agenda, and of course it's somewhat understandable that this Brussels ecosystem, which in itself is basically an ecosystem, but let's call it a bubble, in order to survive, to have more power, it just needs to accumulate more and more resources, more and more decisions, more and more power. And this is how it gets stronger. And the last commission, I think, was the worst in this regard. So when Jean-Claude Juncker was elected commission president, he said that he wants to have a very political commission. And I think that the commission has been doing politics, so they were involved in politics in the last 5 years, and the results are there for everyone to see. You had Brexit, which was in large caused by the European Commission talking down to the UK, not taking into account what the people of the United Kingdom want, and they just grew tired of it. So this is a very, very bad example, I think, for the Commission to do politics. And the other thing maybe is the immigration crisis. So even now, the Commissioner for Immigration, the Greek Commissioner, Dimitris Avramopoulos, is trying to force this quota system on countries, even though it was very clear that the majority of countries, even though they are smaller countries, but the majority of countries oppose this. So there is a growing influence of Brussels, and I think this is not legal because according to the Lisbon Treaty, the Commission should be the guardian of the treaties. But it's not doing that, it's doing something entirely opposite. Slowly, but it's trying to do this stealth accumulation of power, which I think is probably the highest risk for the EU in the upcoming years. But back to your question, I expect on the short term to have more intensive debates. I think the same debates regarding immigration, regarding economic policies, regarding the next budget, for example, and regarding the decision-making in the European Council, these debates will get more extreme. The fault lines between countries will get deeper. But on the long run, I really do hope, so it is my hope that the countries, even the large countries like Germany, will realize that it is not in their interest to form some sort of empire out of the EU, some European empire led by Western Europeans, but to go back to the original goals of the EU and try to strengthen member states and the sovereignty of member states in order to have a more equal cooperation. But I'm afraid that at this point there is a very big pressure coming from Western Europe to move into the other direction, to enforce decisions that have not been consensual. So to have decisions in the European Council made not on the basis of consensus, but on some simple majority. So if small countries will lose their veto rights, there will be no stopping this project of European empire. And I think that small countries like ourselves and Central Europe in general has experienced that empires are never a good thing for us. So it always ends badly.
So only the last thing that's
suppressed. I would like to think not, but it all goes down to simple power politics. And this is the problem, that right now equality between member states is not being talked about. They are trying to get rid of veto rights, which for most member states is basically the only power they have. And if they do this, then the logics of power politics will come into play. And of course, together, the whole of Western Europe, joined by Northern Europe, can, if they stand behind a single liberal agenda of having this liberal European empire, then I'm afraid that in this empire there will be no place for Central European countries. At least not with their sovereignty in place.
Ja, tako, s tem zanimivim pogovorom smo prišli tudi do zaključka nocojšnje posebne oddaje Drugorazredni. Prihodnji teden smo nazaj z novimi svežimi zgodbami, ki pestijo slovenski narod. Če imate tudi vi svojo zgodbo, ki bi nam jo radi predstavili, nam pišite na elektronski naslov drugorazredni@nova24tv.si. Naša novinarska ekipa bo zgodbo preučila in morda predstavila v kateri izmed prihodnjih epizod. Nikar ne pozabite, dovolj je bilo delitev na prvo- in drugorazredne državljane. Čas je, da tudi vi poveste na glas. Lahko noč.